again, the buyer's consult was one of the things that I said, make sure you're doing a buyer's consult, because 9 out of 10 agents don't do it. And your client will love you if you do a buyer's consult. And not only that, but you're educating them on what to expect. So if you do a buyer's consult, they feel better, you feel better. And then when it comes time to write offers, they'll be a lot smoother throughout the process. Outside of that, the other thing that you want to do is always review the purchase contract with your client, whether it's over the phone, on Zoom, in person. If shit hit the fan and you got sued and you ended up at court, and that judge is going to say, hey, Sam, did you walk your client through that purchase contract? If you say no, you're done. You just lost. You know what I mean? You just literally are guilty. And that's where it's like a doctor taking notes. You, as a legal professional of an agent, have to explain this to the clients. And again, like, most clients don't do this, even though it's freaking crazy that they would, is the ability to literally sit down in front of a client and walk them through the contract in a smooth way. So, hey, Sam, here's a purchase contract. It's reviewed by Reen Sand, who's our broker in charge to make sure it's good to go. Reference date of March 7th. Address of 1720 E1 Palolo Avenue, 01 Honolulu, Hawaii, 96816. The TMK is just a more legal description of the property, so we all know we're talking about the right one. To the state, it is 1334737. 2 is the TMK number. So, agency. I am your buyer's agent. I have a fiduciary responsibility to take care of you in the highest regard. I don't care about the seller's agents. I'm here to protect you. More importantly, if I were to pass away, you would still have a contract, as the contract is actually with EXP, not Sam Bass. The same thing goes for the seller. So the seller's agent has a fiduciary responsibility to take care of the seller at the highest regards. And again, they're not that certain agent. They're actually Paradise Island Realty LLC. So if they passed away, there would still actually be a live contract there. So I'm the buyer's agent, they're the seller's agent, and that's how we move forward. Deposits. So we'll actually do a wire within 3 days of acceptance of $1,000 laid out here in C2. That will actually need to be wired into escrow within that 3 days. We're putting the date that they have to get back to us as March 11th. So we usually give 24 to 48 hours for them to give a response. And again, they have till March 11th at noon to give us a response. The financing purchase price is $1,000 earnest deposit, $1,000 additional. So after we satisfy the J1 inspection period, we'll actually do an additional $1,000 for a balance of the down payment being a total of $169 for the total cash funds as $171,000. And you are doing a conventional mortgage of $684 for a total purchase price of $855,000. All of the addenda included in the contract is going to be the as-is condition addendum, which again does not mean that the property conveys as is. We can still negotiate it. It is just a disclosure that nothing else is going to be in the home's place by the time we close. Depends on, and this is for you. If they're VA, then you have the VA financing addendum. Dual agency if it's represented by 2 agents in EXP. So there will be a different addendum for each scenario, but pretty much the basics are going to be the purchase contract and as is. Depends on what else we want to put in there. We can, and again, we'll put that in the template that you have to submit, but pretty much those are the 2 main ones. Again, E1 description, again, a more legal description. So we're all talking about the same property, TMK number, and then all that fee simple, a 5,547 square foot home, including its 692 square foot home on top of that. Again, just a basic description of the property, all of the inclusions. So for you, you want to double check and triple check inclusions, one for your buyer, one for yourself, and then especially on the sale side. As a mistake, you might, if you mess up on this type of stuff, this is where you buy presents, AKA a washer or a dryer. I was representing the seller one time and they checkmarked washer, NA'd, dryer, and we were excluding the washer and dryer. My client, for some reason, wanted to take their washer dryer, but the agent slipped one by on checking washer, and I didn't catch it. At the end of the transaction, what happened? I had to then buy that washer for them. Wow.
Oh,
so,
what a dick.
Yeah, no, it's this is how learning lessons, like when stuff like that comes up, I'll tell you what, never happened again. I freaking triple, quadruple check inclusions. But again, you want to just verify, and this is where when you submit the offer as well, goes into the template, and you submit it for me to sign. You're going to have the HBR, like the MLS printout. You're going to have the city, county tax records, the realist tax records, and then everything. And that way, when I review the offer, I can actually go through and make sure it's good. When you fill out the offer, though, you can use the pictures, and there's a reason why we keep a file of the home on with pictures, because there have been situations in the past, not with me, but you hear about it, where closing happens and the new buyers go into the home and they're all different crappy appliances than what they originally saw.
Yeah.
So that's where you keep copies of, hey, these were the appliances that were promised. And that's what happens. So again, inclusions are extremely important. If there's a PV system, it gets in there.
When you bought your washer, you had to get a comparable washer then.
Yeah. Yep. The one they wanted, basically. If there's basically furnished, most of the time, if it's like a loan, you're not going to put that it's furnished. Lenders don't like to see that it's furnished in the contract, because then it looks like you're taking a mortgage out for furniture, which they don't want. So, and E4, typically we don't use it. If you're going to do something, it would be outside of escrow, where you have an agreement. Hey, my buyer agrees to pay $500 for all the furniture, stuff like that. E5, exclusions. So if they wanted to specifically exclude something. So closing, scheduled closing date, we're going to put 45 days after acceptance. If there is going to be extension or a change to the closing date, there is a unilateral right of either the buyer or seller for 14 days that they can actually extend if somebody needs it. Escrow is going to be title guarantee, which escrow is basically the third-party referee of the transaction. They handle the finances and the recording, and they're in there to make sure everything goes as smoothly as possible. Prorations, closing adjustments, none. So everything is prorated according to when the date closes. And then in F6, the closing costs. So this is basically the layout of how closing costs are calculated. They're right at about 1.25% on the buy side and 1.25% on the sale side. So just as you see it, the seller pays 60% of the title insurance, buyers pay 40%, and then everything else besides that is basically split 50-50. Conveyance tax, so this is how you buy it. If you're buying it as principal residence or an investment property, you have to check mark that. And then assessments. So any special assessments levied against the property need to be either disclosed or taken care of by the seller at closing. So let's say somebody was walking on the sidewalk and fell and sued the developer. That might be a special assessment. That would actually have to be disclosed to you in order to move forward. Because again, if something comes up that the buyers don't want, then they can cancel and move forward to another property. So consent, risk of loss, possession, and keys to the property. So everything in Hawaii takes place at recording. So mainland and Hawaii are a little bit different. So the way it works is you sign. A day later, the loan funds. 2 days later, it will then record at the Bureau of Conveyances. And on recording is when it is legally your property, the buyer. So if a week before recording, the home burns down, the seller's home just burnt down. If a week after recording, the home burns down, your home just burnt down. So everything takes place on recording in Hawaii. Title search and preliminary title report. So escrow will basically pull a background check on you, the buyer, and the property to make sure it legally can transfer into your name. If for some reason they find something that prevents that, they have to disclose it, try to fix it, and then you can choose if you want to move forward or not. Financing contingency. So there is no contingency on obtaining cash funds. So this would be if you had to sell a home in order to buy another one. This is where you would disclose it right here. You contingency on obtaining cash loan. So this one, they're doing a refinance on the Big Island in order to get the down payment. And then again, H3 financing contingency. So they're getting a loan on the property. If they can't get the loan, obviously they're not going to be forced to pay cash for the property, and they would basically be able to terminate based on that. So with getting a loan, buyers have certain obligations. They have the pre-approval, which is attached, and then they have to be able to provide conditional loan approval 15 days prior to closing, or roughly 30 days after acceptance. Seller's right to cancel. They don't have any rights to cancel. If you as a buyer, if they accept this, they're legally stating that under all of these circumstances, they will sell the home. So as long as you follow all of these timelines, they legally have to sell you the home. And if they chose not to, you would technically be able to pursue action. Seller's obligation to disclose. So the sellers have to disclose any material facts that would adversely affect home value. Somebody dying, if the home flooded 10 years ago, and then they would actually have to take it a step further and say, it flooded 10 years ago, and this was everything and the receipts of everything we did in order to fix the property. So again, what happens is you receive the disclosure statement, and then you'll usually have about 5 days to review to make sure you're comfortable moving forward. If for some reason you find out something later on that they didn't tell you, you tell the sellers, and then they legally have to redisclose that fact back to you, and that timeline would start again. Yep. Remedies regarding mandatory, they just have to disclose. This gets into the general Hawaii get out of jail free card. So general disclosures, government and private restrictions, building permit disclosures, asbestos, hazardous waste, wastewater, mold. There's mold in Hawaii. If we see signs of it, you can choose to further investigate. But again, it happens. It's sex offender registration, which is Megan's law. If the seller knows, they have to disclose it. And then you buying the home, you should know the neighborhood. So go online, check it out, make sure you're comfortable buying in that area. Flood zone. So if it's in a flood zone, there's going to be some additional things that come down. If it's not, no worries. Lead-based paint. If it's built before, or if it's built on 1978 or before, we actually have to do the lead-based paint disclosure, which essentially says you promise not to lick walls, and you're okay with that. J1. So this is the big hurdle of real estate. So you're going to have 10 days that for any reason, if you need to cancel, you want to do it within these first 10 days. If you don't like the home after 1 week, then I say, hey, we cancel based on J1. The home does not work for my client. And you get your money back, and we go find you another property. After J1, it just gets a little bit more difficult. Property conditions. So we will do a final walkthrough 4 days before closing to make sure the property is in the same condition that it was when you saw it before. If for some reason they damaged things on the way out, we'd be able to instruct escrow to withhold the funds to fix that. There are no continuing warranties with the home. Any existing warranties, if they can be transferred, would be transferred over to you. They have to have everything out of the property 6 days before closing. We removed cleaning. We removed pet-related treatment, staking survey. So we actually took out survey, but Pume, for some reason, kept the dates in the boundary encroachment, which, again, we'll give you all the timelines of things that you know, so kind of as a template. Termite. So they'll actually do a termite inspection to make sure there's no active termites or termite damage. If they do find it, the sellers basically have to take care of it in order to close. The lenders will require it. It's paid for by the sellers. Any of the documents, so M1, which is condo documents, this kind of goes into those disclosures. Legally, the sellers have to provide all disclosures and condo documents that are associated with it. So you guys living in Ocean Point, if you sold the home, you actually have to provide all Ocean Point condo documents to the buyer. And then again, they'll say they received it, and then they'll have a certain amount of time to accept all those condo documents. If for some reason you have 3 dogs and they only allow 2, we would actually be able to cancel based on that to go find a place that would allow you to have 3 dogs. Stuff like that. So this next page basically says, I promise to read all of those condo documents. Termination due to default. So 01, 02, 03. Basically, each of these paragraphs is a contingency time period. If you need to cancel, you cannot cancel off, I changed my mind, you will lose money. However, if you need to cancel, we just need to make sure that we cancel within one of these contingency time periods, whether it's 01, 02, 03. Again, within J1 would be a perfectly fine cancellation. If it was 4 days after J1 expired and you tried to cancel based on J1, you'll lose money. So we just need to make sure that we follow the contract, go through that. If for some reason there is damage to you as the buyer or the seller, there is mediation and arbitration in real estate. So mediation is a third-party mediator who sits in between buyers and sellers and tries to figure out who's at fault. If that doesn't work, they can go to arbitration, which is basically a panel of professionals who will then evaluate, figure out who was at fault, and that person will basically have to write a check. Attorney's fees are all separate. So besides suing people, those are your rights with real estate. Harpta FERPTA, if you're non-Hawaiian resident, you have to pay a 7.5% state tax at closing, which is a withholdings. If you're a foreign investor, you have to pay a, 12.5 or 15% tax at closing, no exemption.
Wow.
Yeah. Special terms. So Q1, this is where you lay out any special terms, appraisal clauses, escalation clauses. This is where you basically kind of get creative if you have to get creative. As a BIC, when I review, I'll make sure that this stuff is good to go. Scope of services. I'm a real estate professional. That's all I do. I'm not a contractor, licensed entomologist. I can give you market trends, comparables, but I can't tell you if the home has major damage. So anybody that comes into the home just needs to function within their field of expertise. We have home inspectors come. We have termite inspectors come. Everybody that goes into the home to do something just needs to function within what they do. When people step outside of that, that's where people get sued. We can't promise that any property is going to be worth a certain amount in the future. Unfortunately, don't have a crystal ball. Can't tell you that, or I'd have a lot more money. Disclosure of real estate license status. So if anyone's licensed, so if you as an agent buy your own home, you have to actually disclose that you're a licensed professional. Acceptance date, dates and times, everything is Hawaiian Standard Time. Digital signatures, which are what you're doing right now. It's legally binding. It's the same thing as if you sign it right here in person. Again, the date of March 7th, your names, it's good to go, seller's information. And that is the complete purchase contract. You can run them through, again, the VA financing addendum. The big one you point out there is, hey, there's this thing called an escape clause. If the home doesn't appraise at value, legally you can cancel and get your money back and go. The as-is condition addendum is basically just a disclosure form. Again, it doesn't say that the property that we can't negotiate. It's just a further disclosure that the home is a single-family home. Everything negotiated is wrapped up, and it's actually recorded that everything is good to go after recording and as is. But again, we can still negotiate. So, do you have any questions on the purchase contract?
A ton, but no, not really. No, at this time, I understand what we're doing right now is really just overviewing this stuff and trying to sink it in. And I know, yeah.
Well, okay, so it's all going to seem like a blur, and then like right when it clicks, it's so simple.
Yeah.
And
no, I got it. I like the way it's all spelled out and it's all put into, steps and phases. And there's really, I'm not intimidated is what I'm saying. No, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I can read it. I can understand it. And I see there's a flow.
Yep.
Also, I know as you being the broker in charge, right? You're going to look at this shit anyway.
Yeah, I do. So
yeah, I'm not worried about it. I can't say, no, I got it. I know everything because I don't want to come across like that either. But I got a grasp on it in order to move on, I think.
Well, and that's, again, it's not a script, but you can tell I've done it 1,000 times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's something that I'm recording this. You can listen to it because when you, like Dustin, you have a client in the car and they say, I want to submit an offer. It's actually good. You'll probably have to sit down and explain this to them. And so you want to get comfortable at being able to review it. And the reason why it all does blur together is because once you get your own client and you put them in escrow and you actually write the contract and then you see how the escrow process actually goes through, then it will all click big time. So the other issue with training and being a new agent is it's really hard to get an accepted offer and then track it perfectly through. That is kind of difficult. So a lot of times when you're training, you're popping into final walkthrough, home inspection, signing. You're seeing all these different parts and you're trying to figure out how the actual order is. I think Pume did just get that offer accepted. So she can kind of track with you on this is the escrow process.
Okay.
Yep. So reviewing the contract, again, I can send it to you so you can kind of hear it. Practice walking Sachi through the purchase contract a lot. Fill it out for the $5 million home in Kahala and get used to it.
Yeah, we'll totally pretend like we're buying a $5 million home.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then be able to explain it to her. Because again, it's a critical to be able to go through and actually do it. Most agents don't do it.
But at the end of it, I'm going to have to say, full disclosure, this was bullshit. It's not real.
No, you say it's real. Real.
It's real. It's real.
Okay, so that's purchase contract.
Cool.
Let's see. Where was that anyways? There. So here it is. And again, you can kind of see like when we hit the certain parts of the contract.
Yeah.
Again, you have them all here. Like
Yep.
real proper disclosure, buyer to provide receipt of it. You know what I mean? And it lays out the timeline quite nicely. The coordinator will do a lot. You know what I mean? You need to know how all the steps go. But like Cassie, once it goes in, she's like going down her little system, and it's going through.
So the
Yep.
coordinator thing, do we all use a coordinator?
Yes.
That's something that is done. So that's part of a fee that we need to make sure that'll be taken.
It's $500 a file.
500 a file. And so that's a standard, or is that our standard?
Pretty standard. That's pretty standard.
Pretty standard. And you adopted that standard because that's just the way it should be.
Yeah. So at Better Homes, it was actually required that all agents had to use the coordinator because again, it's kind of like it's kind of quality control. So as far as everybody in the organization, like with a coordinator, like it'll go very smoothly and go very similar. If you have like, you know, rogue agents that aren't using it and they're doing just stupid stuff, then as a broker, I have to be like, what are you doing? You know what I'm saying?
Right,
So
right.
That's where, like, as far as I'm concerned, it's required and it's so worth it. They make sure that all this stuff is going through. And then again, when you have like 6 clients at once, you don't want to be tracking all of these timelines and paperwork and stuff. They do that. And you're there to basically sell homes and get more accepted offers.
Right.